Like when we first started, there were times when someone's like, "Can you do this?" And we'd be like, "Yeah." And Mike and I would leave the meeting and be like, "We gotta figure out how to do this. We gotta figure this out." Well, we were committed to doing that, and in the end, it all worked. So.
Hi. Hello.
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 Hello, and welcome to ARCHITECTing.
Hi, welcome to ARCHITECTing. I'm Rebecca Wagner, here with the host, Adam Wagner. Hey, Adam, who's on the podcast today?
You're really bringing the energy on a Sunday evening, aren't you? I had to get you up from bed to do this. Let's try it again real fast.
Hi, welcome to...
Wow. Those espressos really worked fast, didn't they?
Hi, welcome to ARCHITECTing. I'm Rebecca Wagner, here with the host, Adam Wagner. Hey, Adam.
Hey, Becca.
How's it going?
Good.
Who's on the podcast today?
So today we have a couple of cool dudes. We have Blea and Breton Lujan from Raw Creative.
Good ones.
You've heard these guys talk a lot of times, right?
Yeah, I had Mike Blea at a Christopher Kelly session one time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we get into this in the episode, but we knew about them early on when we moved to Colorado because we also had a raw design at the same time. And I remember being a little scared that they might sue us or something. And it's funny, I talked to them about that, and they're like, we were barely keeping our heads above water. We would not care if there's another Raw Creative. But it seemed important at the time. But I'd seen Mike, met with Mike a few times, never met with Breton before. This was a little bit of a weird one where I was all prepared and felt official and sat down for a remote interview, and then it just didn't work. It wasn't working, and we figured out we were 5 minutes drive away from each other, so they came to our house, and I had to put the microphones up very quickly, and it felt dirty in our house, and the dog was walking around. And so it was a little bit looser, but I think it turned out it was a good conversation.
Yeah, it must have been nice to be in person again.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, definitely was. Let's see. In this, we talk a lot about Rick. I don't know if we ever said his last name, so that's Rick Summerfield of Colorado Building Workshop at CU Denver. Very influential guy with a lot of students coming out. A pretty good basketball player as well. He scores a lot. I'm not going to say he's a dirty player, but the first time he started playing with us, I came away with this huge scratch on my arm. Not saying he did it, but it's kind of a coincidence. Anyway, so what were we talking about? It was massive. Yeah, it's a big scar. And he was guarding me most of the day. Anyway, so good interview, impressive guys, started their own company right out of school. And I was able, between the interview and releasing this, I was able to go to one of their office parties, a big crawfish boil. And it was just a fun environment in their shop. And it seems like they're building a really good crew of people, and talking about sort of as young firm owners, purposely trying to hire obviously like better people than they are, the better skills than they have, and kind of shedding their ego in a way, and just building a solid firm of this pretty interesting business model of design assist and fabrication, and now branching off into their own design and architecture firm. Build studio. So
it's really cool.
You're like giving me the eyes like this one's going way too long. We need to wrap it up.
No, I'm actually really excited to hear this one. I think their business model is interesting. I think they do really nice work, and I'm surprised they started it right out of school. That must have been crazy.
They started in school. They were doing both.
Yeah, that sounds easy.
But yeah, two Colorado natives, two unicorns, doing good work. So
fun.
Yep. Enjoy. Hey, we're happy to be sponsored by Modern in Denver magazine. For over a decade, they've been crafting fantastically curated content on Colorado designers and projects, spreading the gospel of good design within our region.
And I love how the goal of Modern in Denver aligns with the goal of this podcast, to better build up and connect the community of Colorado designers. So go buy a copy of the magazine at your local bookstand, subscribe to their weekly email list, and follow them on Instagram.
Check it out.
Well, cool. Thanks for coming over. First time in person.
Thanks for having us.
It's like real life again. 2 years ago, never happened. And we have Riley the dog walking around, making noises. So that's what's going to happen. But we had a funny thing where we were starting the remote interview, and then the audio just turned off. And I said, "Where are you guys at?" And they're just a few blocks away. And so now we're over here in the house. So first one.
It's way better this way.
Yeah, it is.
This feels like just kind of an overview of our entire career. Like, oh, it's not working now. We just got to pivot and change and do something else.
Well, that's a nice pivot there. So who are you guys? Start off all awkward.
I'll let you go first.
My name's Breton. Grew up in the Roaring Fork Valley, Basalt, Aspen area. Wasn't originally born there, but pretty much from there. And, love everything outdoors, hiking, mountain biking, rock climbing, snowboarding, splitboarding, everything outside.
Boarding.
Pure Colorado. Yeah. It's a lot of board-related things
that's my
you work
happy
on.
place.
Yeah.
So, even with the kid, put her in the backpack and go up the hill. So
Nice.
Yeah. Mike, I was born here, raised here. I would say in terms of like the who you are, I listened to a bunch of the other podcasts, so it's like a very...
Have you crafted the perfect thing?
I thought by now I would have, but I haven't really. Every time I think of something, I'm like, that doesn't really fit either. Yeah. I think that's probably... I'll say that I don't fit into any category.
Nice.
No, I grew up building. My whole family is very blue collar. A lot of my uncles were general contractors. A lot of the family is general contractors. So I wanted to be an architect since I was a really young kid, probably 8 or 9. And then I actually, after undergrad, decided I hated architecture and went into did construction management. And I just had the most circuitous path to coming all the way back to architecture. So
you can't get away. It brings you back.
It does, yeah.
Grabs you.
At first I'm I hate the theory. This is all just I don't like it. And then I go into construction management. I'm like, this is super dry. I'd like a little bit of creativity. So luckily, I think we've been able to craft.
Yeah, I was going to say, right in the middle is raw creative.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
So what was that when you were growing up? You were like, okay, I want to be an architect.
Legos.
Yeah.
That was it. I think I actually remember the time when I was playing with Legos, and I think it was my mom who said something like, "Maybe you'll grow up to be an architect." And I was like, "What is that?"
Yeah.
It's the person who designs the buildings. And immediately I was like, oh, that sounds awesome. I didn't really fully understand what that meant until graduate school, probably. I didn't know what an architect really was.
I still don't know what that means.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
It's a very vague term, I think. But,
yeah.
I mean, I had the same experience too, just growing up playing with Legos, and my mom was the same person. Talking to my second grade teacher, was he's going to be an architect, plays with Legos. I didn't know any of this at the time, but I was actually an open option going into undergrad at Boulder, and during my tour, I decided to declare for environmental design and do architecture, and I had my first studio. I absolutely hated it. Called my dad, being like, "Fuck this! I'm dropping out. I'm going to culinary school." And during that conversation, my dad's like, "You can go to culinary school and be a chef, or you can be the one that designs the restaurants. You choose." And at that point, I think...
What would you say now? Would you still say that? Yeah. Actually, yeah.
I really love designing restaurants. I love design in general. And, as a hobby, I love to cook still. Me and my wife cook all the time. So it's the best of both worlds here.
Nice.
So
when I retire, I'm going to culinary school.
That seems like a good thing to do when you have money. Open a restaurant.
Yeah, for sure.
So what was it about that first year that almost forced you out?
I think it was just the rigor of the work. At that time, I was still trying to compete in snowboarding, still traveling and doing studios, and it became very apparent that you can't do both. So that was the hardest part, just the time demand I didn't expect for undergrad and studio in general. And also some of the teachers I had at the time were not my favorite. So, don't have to go into that. But.
After a few more beers, we'll get into that. I feel like that's a thing, especially with like Colorado students. You know, like going to school at Kansas State. There's no mountains. There's nothing else to do. You're like, okay, I'll be in studio. But here you're like, hey, I see those mountains, and my board's right there.
Yeah.
Just growing up too, like I was, in high school, taking off every other day. It was a half day for me traveling, snowboarding, and like still trying to do that in Boulder because it was very close to the mountains.
Yeah.
It was a choice, and I'm glad I decided to, get serious about architecture and start studying and do my work. But it's the way it goes.
So was it a professor or something that got you back into it, or just the idea of like, I'm going to buckle down on this and go?
I think at first I'm going to get serious and buckle down. And then along the way, professors that I had that I really appreciated definitely, helped manifest that.
Yeah. Were you guys in school in the same time or? Yeah.
Yeah. That's how we originally met. Was it Studio 2 that we had together?
Yeah. Undergrad.
Yeah. And he was competitive in snowboarding and I was competing in skiing, and so we kind of like cross paths sometimes.
So you just started fighting and just
yeah. We still have to debate which one's better.
Yeah. That's a whole nother episode.
Yeah.
So like that was your experience, Mike, and then like with you with studio, was it you were like, okay, I know the Legos here. This is the same sort of thing. And then by the end of undergrad, is that when you started getting like disillusioned with it, or?
It was actually, I think, probably most of the undergrad for me, and it wasn't because I think all the teachers were great, and I looking back now, I really value the time that I had there. But I think I was coming from like working on job sites and framing with my uncles and stuff, and you go into studio. And it's all theoretical, and people are drawing stuff that it's like, it's just a line instead of what a wall actually looked like. And it was just driving me insane, like the whole thing. I was like, you can't build that. That's impossible. Like, no way. And it wasn't until probably graduate school that I really like got into the theory and got into understanding why that is important and why it makes architecture special. There's a difference between good buildings and good architecture, I feel like. And I think I was just coming from that construction side.
Yeah.
So
that's hard. Like my dad is a general contractor. And so I had this sort of same thing. And I was like, I'll go to architecture school so that I can be a better general contractor. And then like 2 weeks in, I was like, okay, I'm drinking all this Kool-Aid. Like I'm totally in, and like none of this needs to be built. And it's a lot better than these like single family, like Kansas developer homes. And, but there is like pressure there, especially with family and like lineage and everything, right? Of like, what are you spending your money on here? What is this thing? But
it's like exactly. That's exactly what it was. It was very, like you grow up and most of the family members are talking about how like architects don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They just draw stuff that's it's pretty pictures and it's whatever. And then you go to school and you see that happening.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh shit, they were right.
What am I becoming?
Right. I think in a way I was trying to like push it away. And then when I went to construction management after my undergrad, that's actually when I started realizing like, I actually do really like the theory side of it and the design and the creativity. And then it took me 4 tries to get my master's degree in Denver.
Oh yeah.
And I finally got in, and like, I think going into grad school, I was like, I'm going to take this really serious and really try and excel. And then I drank the Kool-Aid all the way, so to speak. Like I was just all in at that point.
It's a different mindset when you go to grad school, I feel like.
Yeah.
I was the same way. I finished Boulder, moved back to Aspen. I'm like, I'm going to get a year of like living up here and bartending and just snowboarding. And it was the worst winter they had in like 20 years. So the mountains all closed early. But then my wife and I moved back to Denver to go to grad school. And it was like, all right, we're taking this real serious.
So was it a clear idea for you, Breton, of like, I want to go back for grad school for architecture then? Or yeah. And it's because like your experience kind of ramped up through those 4 years, or again, was it like the absence of architecture? Like
no,
Mike,
I think like my first year and freshman year, I did horribly like academically, and like spent the next 3 years like building back up my GPA, and like graduated, like did really well, and then was super into it, and doing like they had like the studio awards back in the day, and doing well in all those. And I definitely wanted to go back to grad school. And that's where we like linked up, was like orientation of grad school. I was like, oh, Mike, hey. And like we had a couple studios together and partnered up on studios. And I think like through our grad school year, like we won every single studio awards that was like during our time, which is kind of cool.
And so did that, I mean, obviously you guys were like friends in undergrad, but was there a seed of like, okay, let's start something in undergrad, or it really
definitely
came?
grad school.
Yeah.
When I was in undergrad, I was working in the fabrication studio and that was like, prior to that, I'd never seen a CNC machine or a laser cutter or anything. Like I just kind of, that like got me through grad school, working in the fabrication studio, because I really saw a lot of value in that and being able to use these tools. And I wasn't sure if it was product design or what it was, but I also knew that I really enjoyed working with other designers and seeing all these creative projects coming in. And so when I left and did construction management, I was still working at the fab shop in Boulder. And even when I was in grad school, I guess I was still working there. And that's how eventually, I think some of our early projects for Rock Creative were built either in the Boulder or Denver wood shops.
They definitely were.
Well, and you guys did the design build program too, right?
Yeah.
Did you do one of those or two, or?
I did one formally with Rick, which was like the best experience I had in like all of my, graduate career, was the design build program. Like that got me like the whole idea of like, we should be designing and building.
I want to do this forever.
Yeah, exactly.
So
what was that the perforated metal one? The
Lamar Street
solution? Yeah. I'm good friends with Joe Coleman, and like doing that with you guys, and I love heard a lot about that. Yeah, he's the best.
Yeah.
You always make jokes because I feel like Rick always knows like the solution to the problem at the very beginning. He kind of guides the students to getting there. He was like, we have this project. Here are the parameters, and he has the solution already figured out. But he like guides all the students to get there and like make them think of his original thought.
At the end of the semester, he like reveals the initial sketch that he did. Look what we got here. Right. There you go, Rick. Yeah.
I feel like that hands-on building like really made it special to be like, Mike was the one who approached me. It was like, we should start a company. I'm like, I'm game, let's do this. But it was driven because I think we were in that design build program, and the idea of we could control everything from start to finish. And, it was just, that was like the moment where we thought we should do design build and fabrication.
Yeah. And that was Rick was working on the Boulder Museum of Contemporary Art for, I think it was like one of the first design build
with Marcel
projects.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I was working in the fabrication studio, and I saw that class go through there, and I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to do something like that. And then I got out, and my grades weren't good enough to get into grad school, so I had to beg, steal, and borrow to eventually get into school.
I promise I'll be better.
Yeah, exactly. Literally, I think my letter might have been like, I promise to do better. So, but I think doing the design build thing was like, in school, that was sort of like the pinnacle of being like, okay, now I kind of see how I can weave all of this stuff together a little bit.
And was there a model for that business for you guys? And you knew what it was, like it's Raw Creative and this is who's doing it, and then we want to be like that, or?
Yeah, I think so. I would say Matthew Huft came and talked to Boulder, and I remember thinking that was kind of the precedent, I guess. And then I utilized the design build program. Part of it is like writing business plans and doing managing risk, and so I kind of like did our company from start to finish in those courses, and had a lot of help. Like even at that point in time, I was talking to Rick and asking him about like, do you think this is a good idea? Is this stupid? And it had a lot of good feedback from everyone, and me and Breton teamed up on some studios and like working really well together, and it made sense to try and do something that utilized our talents. And I think at the time it was probably coupled with being a little naive about how the real world works. So, and I think we're still learning how the real world works a little bit, but
I'd rather not know how the real world works.
Yeah.
Let me stay in my bubble.
Right.
Go ahead.
I was like, that's the hard part is like we want to start this company because we love design and we love building, we love fabrication, but along the way, it's like you need to learn the business. Like, how do you run a business? How do you hire employees? Like, how do you manage a team? And how much of that takes up your time compared to like what you actually started the business for? Like, we started the business so we could design.
Yeah.
And we find ourselves like being operators rather than designers. And that's a huge thing to like learn along the way. And, you know, that triggers mistakes along the way as well. Hardship.
We always joke about like, you know, like on the people's resumes, the cool thing is to do the bubbles.
Yeah.
And I always think about like, you know, going into an interview now and being like, dude, my QuickBooks skills are like this guy's like level 5 QuickBooks master.
Yeah. It's like, where's the Revit? Where's the Rhino on this scale? Yeah.
What's Revit?
Yeah, what's Revit? I know, I was just saying that today. Like, I was up late last night. We were like doing this renovation of a house, and it was this little back stair porch. And I stayed up till like 2 a.m. working on it because I just got so into it. And it was like, when's the last time I designed something? It's been like 3 weeks, 4 weeks. I've just been writing proposals and doing other things. So have you figured that out? Tell me the secret. How do you get back into design?
We haven't figured it out. Try and hire good admin people if we can. That's right. And I feel like right now we're learning how to delegate. Like that's the hardest skill that I wasn't anticipating learning is when you're designing, it's hard enough to work in a team with people. But it's really hard to hand over, you know, an idea and say, help me bring this to fruition and trust that it's going to go kind of the way you're hoping. And I feel like that's taken a lot of.
So what are you like 8 years in and you're starting to get there?
I feel like I'm like 10% of the where I want to be at. Yeah. So I feel confident by the time I retire, I'll have it.
So you'll be able to know how to delegate. Right. Delegate so well that you can retire.
Yeah, exactly.
When did you guys graduate?
2014.
14?
Yep.
And so it was like raw creative right from the gates, or did you work somewhere?
Our last year of grad school, we had started the company just doing like furniture projects. I think we were leaving Rick's design build studio. We were driving to like
kitchen remodel.
Yeah.
Nice.
Greenwood Village. Like remodeling someone's kitchen.
Yeah.
We were working while we were in school on some of the projects. Yeah. And in the wood shops.
What project are you building there? Yeah. It's a jig.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. It's a furniture project for a studio that we're taking. It's life size, and don't worry about it. It's fine.
It's 1-to-1.
Yeah.
So was there any fear there when you graduated? And again, you're saying, yeah, I'm not going to get a job at a firm that pays me a salary, mom and dad. I'm starting my own thing. Like,
I think immediately it wasn't because I think at the time we both had other jobs. At the time I was bartending over at Linger. You were still working at the sink up in Boulder. Yeah. So we were doing the business on the side. I think it was the time came when, you know, we just said like, I'm going to quit my job and just do this full time and take that leap. And I think that was the moment where it was like, all right, this is real. Like we're going to focus 100% of effort onto this.
Yeah.
And it almost was like, in some ways I feel like it was probably easier because like coming out of school, you know, you're making $12-15 an hour somewhere. You're like, well, you know, worst comes to worst, I can keep doing this. Whereas like the people that have like, you know, kids and are switching jobs and stuff, that would stress me out. I mean, to no end. So I feel like it actually maybe was somewhat easier. And again, probably part of that just being naive, you know, and not knowing what was going to happen. I mean, I remember our first project we did, we like cashed our first check, and it was like $300. And it was just like, oh, here we go.
Knocked down the whole kitchen.
Yeah,
$300.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
In the bank.
Yeah. In retrospect, you're like, you know, that probably didn't even cover the gas to get it.
Yeah, I know. Was there any? It's funny, you know, when I graduated, I also started raw design, another raw design, and did that for a while, and I always have a slight, like, not chip on my shoulder, but always like, oh, I don't quite know as much because I haven't worked in as long of firms or something like that. And, you know, I didn't really think about that in graduating, but then, you know, does that ever get to you? Or like, now you're like, just look at all these checks I'm cashing. Don't worry about it. $300 over and over.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but for me, it's always there. And I think it just, you know, like I've read a lot about like the imposter syndrome.
Yeah,
you know, and I think I think that's consistent across all design because it is such a open-ended field, and no one could ever know everything. But yeah, I mean, even now, you know, when you don't know something that you feel like maybe you should know, or I think it creeps up all the time. And there's you hear the people, I've heard it on this podcast before about, these guys that I'm considering are just like these, megaliths of architecture in Colorado that are saying like, yeah, we felt that way. We felt that way 2 months ago, or something like that. And you realize it's just something you deal with.
Yeah. I think like we're constantly trying to like refine our process and like, how do we make a process to like make this workflow make sense, be profitable, be efficient? And I always think back like, well, maybe if I worked in a firm, like I would have picked it up along the way. And yet that may be true. But the other side of it is like, well, being, entrepreneurs and doing this on ourselves, like we were able to like take risks that we would not been able to take if I worked at a firm. And I think like those leaps and bounds kind of like outweigh, the knowledge base that we would have acquired. Yeah. So like, it's always a give and take of, it could have been, different here, but I'm always like, I'm really proud of the way we did it. And just, we're hungry and like we're gonna like make ourselves learn, and he reads more than I can ever imagine. But like we're like we always are trying to learn. Like, well, if we can't figure it out, we'll research it and like find a process and like implement it. So we're committed to always like building and being better. Is I think part of why we've been able to be successful to this point.
Yeah, and I think we've tried to instill a culture at our company too of it's like it's okay to not know the answer. Like it's all about like the research and figuring it out and finding the solution. We'd rather you have those skills than come in and say like, I know everything. Like I can solve any problem.
Yeah.
Like I think that's important.
And the person who can solve any problem is like 60 years old and has been in a firm forever. That imposter syndrome is so difficult. And it's like, I could know a lot or know most things, but I'd have to be at a firm for 10 years and maybe I only do these kind of projects and I still don't know everything. And it's like the leaps and bounds you get from having your own firm and like forcing you to do all these things, even if it's kitchens or whatever, it's
like when we first started, there were times when someone's like, can you do this? And we'd be like, yeah. And Mike and I would leave the meeting and be like, we gotta figure out how to do that. We gotta figure this out. Well, we were committed to doing that, and in the end it all worked. So
it's like the ultimate fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Right? It's just like you just have to, keep doing it.
There's so much of that. Just do that and have good insurance. And
Make sure you're covered.
Make sure you're covered.
Or and be willing to. The other thing I feel like is being willing to reach out to people that have done it before, especially designers. Like there's such a good community of designers in Denver and in Colorado in general, and like most of the time, we can reach out to someone and say, we've never done this before. Can we buy you a beer and just talk it through? And like, I've never had anyone just say flat out like, no.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like everyone's usually pretty willing to share their knowledge and talk about things and go over, Rick, his thing is like scar tissue, you just build up scar tissue after doing things over time. And I feel like that building up that scar tissue and learning is the thing you can glean from other people too.
For me, it's just gray hair. I was total black when really against me.
That's true.
It's like a good like silver fox over here. Yeah, you're pulling it off. Yeah.
That's what it is, like the leveraging our relationships. Just people that are in, like we started in the restaurant industry, and talking with them and knowing that we're a young firm, trying to make it and giving us opportunity to like do a restaurant here and there, and the trust and knowing that like we're not going to stop until we succeed. We're going to work way more than a seasoned firm may to make this job special. And I think it's like, people gravitate towards that as well, that young energy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I'm pretty envious of you guys in the business model. And I think, a lot of students and people coming out, it looks pretty good, but just from the sense of being able to work with so many different designers and things, it's so easy within just architecture to get so siloed. That's why I like this, right? But I don't get many clients off of this by talking to other architects. But you guys do, and like you guys get to have that collaboration, and also just changing that typical design business model is smart. Yeah, it's good.
Thank you. Yeah, it was. Like I said, it was Huff that I think was kind of the leader for us. And then, we've been manipulating our business and the way that we're kind of operating. And even now we're making some pretty big changes to like the structure and things. And just because of stuff we've learned along the way.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Cause talk about that. So, what were some of the first projects? So you had the kitchens and sort of restaurants. How soon were you buying your own equipment and having a space, and like what was that sort of build up of services like?
We should talk about the first space.
I mean, yeah, the first space we had was for a friend of mine that owned a hot sauce company and a coffee roasting company. So we took over probably about the size of this room.
This is a small room.
Yeah. Our shop was literally like 15 by 15 feet. It was tiny, and everything was on wheels, so we could like move everything out into like the walkways and run the planers, run the joiners, run the drill presses, and creating mounds of dust while someone's like trying to roast chilies. And pretty apparent, like,
this is a smoky,
watery.
Yeah, this is not gonna work, right? And they had like a food truck at the time too, selling ice cream. So they'd like come back at 1 a.m. from selling ice cream all night, and we'd be like making sawdust and welding. So that lasted, a couple months, did a couple projects, and then we moved into the back of a CrossFit gym that was about 800 square feet, which felt huge at the time. From there, we went to like 2,500 square feet over on Jason Street. Built we're gonna build an office in here, and we like built this whole cube. And like as soon as we finished it, we're like, we have to move out. No room. Like you'd be working at your computer, and like by the end of the day, there'd be dust everywhere. So now we're in our fourth warehouse, which is about 10,000 square feet. Same idea. We're like, we're gonna build these offices in here. It's gonna be great. We moved in quickly, bought a construction trailer, and parked it in the fire lane out back because that was the only way to have an office.
No, not the fire lane. In case anyone from Denver is listening, it's not the fire lane.
The alley in the back of the warehouse.
Yeah.
So now we have like our construction trailer that we like did a light remodel on, made it workable. We have our warehouse, which is like what we need, but the whole idea of like raw creative being design, build, fabricate has like kind of shifted in the sense that like, we're focusing raw creative to be fabrication only, really highly collaborative with other GCs, other architects, fabrication focus. And we're slowly kind of figuring out like, how do we just market like a different architecture firm that's more, peer-to-peer or, customer based. Because raw creative, we started the idea of we're going to do it all. We're going to design, we're going to build, we're going to GC, we're gonna get our hands dirty, and like that was great to a certain scale of projects. But we reach a scale where like we're humble enough and mature enough to know like we don't have to build everything.
Yeah.
We don't have to have that sense of control. We can break away and figure out like play to our strengths and partner with people that are highly specialized in building. So like we've like over these years we've learned to like, okay, how do we like shuffle down a little bit or scale down, refocus our interest and really try to excel at what we're good at, and we're trying to focus on architecture and fabrication only at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, for sure. Well, and some of the fun like stories I think behind that are like, I remember one of my favorite stories is when we were in that hot sauce company, like that little like tiny area. We had a bunch of tools that I had amassed from working in construction over the years, and we realized we needed like a really good table saw. So Breton took a student loan and bought a saw stop for us and put it in the back of his Subaru. We drove it over, and I'll just never forget, like the guys were like roasting chilies and roasting coffee, and like the food truck was humming, and he like backed in with this saw stop. We like put it all together, which took us forever, and then it's like put together, and we're looking at it in the space, and it's taking up like 30% of what we have. It's like, oh shit, we gotta move.
Could you even get like a 4x8 piece of plywood in there?
We were like cutting stuff to get it in. So yeah, that was it's like fun talking about it now. But like at the time, man, I feel like it's always so stressful in the moment, and then looking back, it's better or not as bad as you thought it was.
Yeah.
But during that time, so the person we were renting it from was Cade, and he had the hot sauce company and the coffee roasting company at the time, and he was opening the Way Back on Tennyson Street, the original one on 38th and Tennyson, 38th and no, Tennyson was on 38, not the one that's actually down Tennyson.
Oh yeah.
Like I remember, like we finished the restaurant, and it was like such like a special moment because it was the first time we took something for like all the way through design. We were the GCs, and we built literally everything in that restaurant. Like looking back, like we would never do that again. But it was like such a big moment for us to realize like the vision of like design, build, fabricate at a scale that you could like walk around and actually feel everything. So I remember that just being a super special moment, like in the early years of our careers, and talking about it for so long. It'd be so cool to design a project, build it, and fabricate it, and like be able to go check it out. And that actually happened, and it was pretty cool.
Yeah. And so how's that shifted now? I mean, that's interesting where now you have the real fabrication capacity, right? Like, been to the shop. 10,000 square feet sounds like a lot, but you guys, really packed it out. You have a lot of cool toys in there and a lot of cool stuff. And so you're really finding that sort of niche of what you want to fabricate and design. But then you're also starting like another company. Is that Build Studio?
Build Studio, yeah. So that was kind of our response to realizing that Raw Creative had such a great presence as being this fabrication entity, and we always wanted it to be like an outlet for other designers too. Because I mean, for us, it's great because we were in the studio, so anything we were designing, we could prototype in there, and I still don't even think we've reached sort of that peak capacity of really working with other architects a lot and helping them solve some of their problems that are more technical from a fabrication based.
Yeah.
And what we realized is that it's pretty hard to have a client that wants to do like a $5 million house be like, oh, these guys also weld, like there's like a disconnect there kind of. So we just realized that it's, from a client facing perspective, it's probably better to have a true firm that's a little bit more the common norm. So
that's interesting. You've built up such a name recognition in a brand, but then the idea of like, okay, I need a different one. I want to start from scratch again. Let's not scratch, but
pretty much. I mean, it's I mean, it's.
So what's the process of that? Where's that at now?
We're doing branding right now, and I think we're probably going to try and be launching our website and rolling it out probably in like the next 6 months. Is kind of our goal. We've been lucky that we never advertised for architecture. We've always just had word of mouth, and we've had great projects from that and repeat clients, and so from that sense, we haven't had to like rush it, which has been nice. It's been more organic, and I think obviously over the past 8 years, our thought process on design and architecture has evolved pretty substantially, and so it's kind of exciting to have like a second shot at starting something with the ideals that we believe in now.
Yeah,
which is kind of cool. So
it's like a band starting another band that they can do other stuff on.
Yeah, exactly.
And when we started the company, we were only using our fabrication studio for our projects, so we weren't like outsourcing it. And now, like the business model has grown and shifted to where like the majority of our business for Raw Creative, the fabrication side, is outsourced. For we're building stuff for other builders or partnering with other architects to like bring these creative pieces to life. And we're only using our fabrication studio for 20% as like our work. So like that idea of really just pushing fabrication to be more collaborative among our peers in Denver has been the goal with that.
Yeah.
And then how do we take what we've learned and just do a design focused architecture firm that'll still like partner and utilize Raw Creative the same way that an outside architect would.
Yeah. And how do you see sort of like your roles or your lanes or your strengths, and how do they come together, and how will it look when you have Build Studio? Do each of you get to go play in that studio while Raw Creative is running itself? And
that's the goal.
That's a good question. Yeah. No, I think that is sort of the goal. Is like what we have realized with Raw Creative is, as much as we like woodworking and welding, like everyone that works in our shop right now is light years ahead of us in terms of skill set. And like, I mean, we go in there now and I'm like asking people where tools are, and like, it's like comical how bad I am compared to them. So because of that, we've realized that like, we've gotten it to a point where we feel like a lot of these people are probably more qualified than us really to be running and managing this thing. And right now we're trying to work at the management level. And then I think for us, the next step would be for us to, I still really like, and I know Breton does too, like going and talking to firms about like why this is a good idea, especially because I can speak to it from the perspective of an architect and a designer and saying, this is a valuable tool. We want you guys to be able to use this and bounce your creative ideas off of it. And I think that's kind of where we want to land, is where we're doing a lot of the lunch and learns and talking to other firms and and selling that process and that idea. But the day-to-day and the management is all kind of self-contained within Raw Creative.
Yeah.
So, and then we'll probably both be really heavily involved in Build Studio. And I think Build Studio it's not only architecture. We've talked a lot about self-developing some projects and some things like that, which we're really interested in. And so that's kind of all evolving at the same time a little bit.
Yeah. Tell me about the Sunnyside ADU. Like I walked by it under construction, and I kept doing like double takes. Like, it's a beautiful project. But
thank you.
So was that like the first project with Build Studio, or
that was actually, I mean, technically it would
you guys
still be Raw Creative.
Okay, yeah.
We designed it. We were the general contractor, and then we fabbed pretty much everything on the inside of it. It was like the way back, but for residential, is the first one where we just got to do pretty much everything.
And you just had a client come to you and ask for that?
Yeah,
that's cool.
We got really lucky. We had a referral from one of our friends from CU Denver that gave us hey, these guys do good work. You should talk to them. The clients were crazy enough to trust us. So we dove into it, and it was one of those projects that, I don't know, from start to finish, it took like 2 years. I mean, there were like zoning variances and a bunch of other stuff we had to go through. But it was an awesome project. It was super fun to work on.
Yeah. Talk about those. You were talking about sort of your ideas of architecture or design have evolved. Can you articulate sort of what your ideas were, maybe graduating to what they are now, and or like identify a project that sort of like stands in for each one of those phases and the growth you guys have had?
Yeah. Well, so I think for me, a good view of sort of coming right out of school and what you think architecture is, or what it should be, for me would be the way back, because at that point in time, I really believed like you should have your hand in everything. You should be like a control freak, and just like make sure that everything is perfect and everything is custom and everything is, no one's ever seen it before.
Yeah.
And then
everything you touch is
it's like
perfect and beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. Like the underside of the bar, well, let's mill some intricate pattern in, because some person might see that someday, And like
the most beautiful purse hook.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Let's forge it ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think that was kind of where we were then. And now we probably both have different kind of like, the nice part about having a business partner is we always have different ideas about stuff. So we have a sounding board for each other, kind of. For me, I'm really interested in like human-centered design and just how things are actually working for people, instead of trying to determine how people should live. And I feel like starting with a blank slate for every single project and just listening to what people are expecting kind of allows you to come up with different ways of solving the problems, which I've been really into recently. Is just trying not to force anything and just kind of let it evolve naturally.
I think the term like rooted in concept, I've gravitated towards that a lot, because through our past projects, the idea of like concept and storytelling has been really important, in the sense of like, we have a client that's very specific. They have a brand, they have a restaurant, and like, how do we tell that story through architecture, and like, what are the materials and what is the design concept that's a reflection of them? And to me, that's always been super special, and like a hospitality sense of like, the work we're doing should be a reflection of the person we're working for. And with restaurants, I think it's almost a little easier, because there is such a strong brand around that. And now as we get into more residential work, really understanding the client and like what's important to them, and trying to make the piece of architecture, conceptual, but tie back to them a little bit personally. To me, that's always super special. And the idea of like storytelling, concept work, that's always really important to me.
Yeah. I think it's like a tough thing, right? I mean, the idea, I like to think I'm very like conceptually driven, and but the idea of sort of the balance between kind of storytelling and almost in a sense like theater design or something, right? Versus sort of a lineage of architecture concept, or something bigger. I feel like a restaurant, you have so much opportunity where, it's kind of normally like a TI project, and it's like more kind of skin based in some ways, right? And you're able to kind of get there, but not let it get too kitsch, or not let it get too whatever, cheesy. And then with the idea of the house, it's sometimes more sort of object-based formal concept, but still merging with that idea of what a client is, as long as you can get away from like, okay, this is a bedroom, that's a bathroom. Like, I just talked to Joseph Monteblano from Studio Trope, and he was saying that when they do programming things, they don't allow people to use any room names. So you have to describe the things you want by how you occupy it, instead of bed, bath, whatever. But
it's genius because there's so much room for ambiguity or uncertainty when you say a bedroom.
Yeah.
It could mean something so different between two people. And what's interesting, like some of the projects we're working on now too that have forced us to rethink is like some houses in Mexico and a hotel project in Mexico where it's really just like it's completely different than stuff we've done in the past. And so we're going all the way back to concept and like why are we doing the moves that we're doing, and what's the significance of this, and how do we explain this to someone that isn't an architect and make them be like, oh, there is value in that,
But I think trying to be as restrained as possible has always been like every time we design together and talk about a concept, it's like, how do we articulate this idea with like one move, right? But then really dive into the details, and I think the detail part comes from like the fabrication and building background. I mean, we GC'd a ton of projects, I product managed a whole bunch of them, and like I learned so much from being on site, learning how to build. Like that's going to help influence some of the moves we do in architecture from like a detailing perspective, which we're dropping some of that and doing focus more on architecture, but there's such a valuable lesson to be entrenched in that workflow for so long. So
yeah, and it's so easy, talking about sort of knowing everything, right? Within architecture, it's so easy to go through architecture and get further and further along in your career and further away from design and ideas, right? And I could see, especially with not that furniture and installation and things like that don't have concept, right? But like getting away from building and allowing yourself to kind of fall away. Like it's a cool thing how you guys are like, no, we need to go back to those roots, and like we need to get back to these things that do matter, and pay somebody else to run the saws.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, and we noticed too that it had such a big effect on the design side, because when you're the GC too, it is so tempting to be like, man, that'd be a really cool detail, but like I don't want to build that. That's going to be a pain in the ass to build. So.
Right.
And now we can just be like, I'm sorry, I know it's a pain in the ass, but this is what you're getting paid for.
So what is that? You were saying before you have some good struggle stories. What was what might be your lowest day, or the hardest day, like one day?
I mean, I'd say the hardest day is when we literally had to fire 30% of our staff. Like we had grown the company. We were getting so busy and taking on everything under the sun, and instead of like focusing on process and how to be efficient and how to outsource and maybe just how to manage, we just kept throwing bodies at the problem. Like, we can get this done if we just hire more people. And we went through a hiring spree, and we were up to like 22 people at some point. And you have one down month, and you learn the hardship of payroll doesn't stop. So what year was that? When this is probably 4 years ago now.
Okay.
You'd been in our new warehouse for about a year, and getting real busy, and just taking every project we could. And, some of them weren't the best fit necessarily for us, but we were like, sure, we'll take it on.
We need to take it on.
Yeah.
When you have the people. Yeah.
And I think, we came to the realization, like, we were making it work and just looking ahead and being like, this isn't going to last. So we just made the decision to, retain the people that were crucial to the business and let go of about 30% of our staff. And they sucked. I mean, people are, coming to work, and we're responsible to provide them salary and provide them with income so they can support their families and themselves, and just cutting everyone off on one day, like, it sucked.
Yeah.
It was horrible.
It was like scar tissue, like Rick says, just like having to do that. And then after that being like, I don't ever want to have to do that again. Do whatever we have to do. And, however strict we are or not strict, or anything that it takes to not have to do this again is.
This is the growing pains, I think, and you have it figured out. And you're like, let's just keep growing. And it extends that moment to Mike's point. Like, we don't want to do that again. So like, how do we get here? Like, why do we get to this point where we were so busy, but we had a staff that we couldn't support? And we've like really pared back and just focused on like, how do we be more efficient? How do we leverage outsourcing? How do we leverage contract workers? You know, a lot of these things that, you know, if we have a slow month, it doesn't matter if we have an outsourced designer, an outsourced contract worker, or part-time people, you know, we can work on a job-by-job basis. And since then, I mean, we've gone from like 12 to 15 people. We've fluctuated now, and we've never had to like fire anyone because of just being, you know, too busy or whatever now. It's just like we've figured out a rhythm and, you know, hiring the right people to do the right jobs, not just throwing bodies at the problem.
Yeah. And to really hold yourself back and say no a lot, it seems like, you know, like, yeah, it seems easy to want to take everything on and think like, oh, I bet this can be okay, even if there's red flags coming up, but like maybe I can get it there and hire somebody. And
I feel like by nature, designers are optimistic, you know? So we just like, we always are like, oh, this could be a really cool project. Like, it, you know, it sounds horrible on the face of it, but maybe it actually is really, really great. We learned to sift through those a little bit better. And I think we've gotten better too at like pre-qualifying clients a little bit more and kind of being like, do we want to work with this person? You know, do we have the same values? Because even sometimes it's a good client, but they just don't have the same values and they're a good fit for someone else. And that's okay. That's a really hard thing to learn. And I don't think we've fully figured that out. It's just kind of something we're working on.
Well, it's also such a nice luxury, right? You know, starting a firm right now, for me personally, you know, it's like, well, and I guess the second time I started a firm, I was doing that, taking every project, and it was just me killing myself, and then I got burned out, you know. Now having a partner, right, things are better, and you can balance things better, but it's still, hard to know what to take and what not to. But then, like you guys, once you've built up this brand and this lineage of being able to be more selective, and has to be nice.
Yeah, well, it is, but it's still like the same feeling where we still get those projects and we're like, oh, we should probably take this. And then it's like we have to talk ourselves back out of it, you know? So I don't feel like we're at the point yet where it comes like second nature to us. We're still in like the fight or flight mode.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Huh. What's your lowest day? Do we have another story?
Yeah. I mean, I think probably when we were working on Uncle, the patio on Uncle, we like, it was one of our first projects, and it was, you know, it was low budget, but we were so amped on design and just like doing everything that I think we just overshot it. And I'll never forget, like, we had a concrete pour in the morning, and we were in the shop, and it's the same shop with like the coffee beans and the hot sauce and everything. Like, imagine that shop. And we decided we had to pull an all-nighter to get all of our formwork built so we could install it before the concrete showed up at 8 the next morning. So as you can imagine, there's no formwork. The concrete is showing up in the morning. So we stay up all night, and we switch off taking naps on this little leather couch. And this is in the middle of summer, so it's like, you know, you wake up and your face is like sticky. It's just horrible. And we go out in the Highlands at like 4:30 in the morning and start using ram sets to set this stuff into the concrete. And surprisingly, the cops didn't show up somehow. And by the time the concrete showed up, we were just like so exhausted. You know, we've been up for like, it had to be like 40, 50 hours at that point. And the concrete truck shows up, and the concrete guys, you could tell, were like, these guys don't know what they're doing. You know, like, sure, we'll start pouring it. So they start pouring it and vibrating it, and one of the forms blows out on the bottom, and this guy like kicks a 2x4 in, and it like barely stayed together. You know, I was thinking like, we're gonna have to chip up the whole sidewalk and like, you know, redo this whole thing. And the concrete got poured, and we had both like canceled vacations because the construction was taking too long. And I just remember sitting down, there's that building, I think it's like a wheat shop now. I was like sitting against that wall, like looking at the formwork, just being like, I don't know if I want to do this. Like, I'm not 100% sure anymore. So,
and then you slowly took the forms off.
That was the next day. Yeah.
Do it, and Rick, of all people, walked up, goes, how's it going, guys?
Yeah.
We're like peeling boards off, and it came out.
You're like, you did this to us. This is your fault.
Yeah, you didn't tell us that it was going to be this hard.
Well, part of that story too is like
he's like, do you know me? Have you heard my life? Yeah.
They had filled all the forms. The guys that are pouring the concrete look at us and like, do you guys have trowels for the top? So I'm like driving over to Ace Hardware on 38 to like get trowels, and I like hand them to the guy, and he like starts doing it. And then just leaves it there, gets in his car and drives away. No. He's like, good luck.
Oh, you're like getting like plastic spoons from Uncle. Yeah.
So as you walk past Uncle, if you look at the top and it's not quite level, that's me and Breton's handiwork of trying to trowel it.
I thought it was like a parametric formwork that you guys did. And it's
inadvertently parametric.
What about high points? What's the best day?
For me,
was it pulling off the formwork? And
yeah. I think honestly the high points for me are like when we have like our Christmas parties, where we have like where we have everyone together and our employees and their families and stuff. Like it's just cool to see, that we were able to sort of build this thing, and now it's so much bigger than us. It's everyone else is kind of helping drive the ship, and it's become this like community of people that are all like-minded and interested in doing cool work and creative stuff. And so I really like that part of it. I think that's been, there's tons of days where I've been super proud about the work we've done, or sat inside of a building that we've done and like, oh, this is super cool. But I just enjoy the human side of it a little bit more, I think.
Yeah. It seems like, that vision that you guys had in school is sort of design based, and this is what I want to do based. But then to see that vision take off and then become bigger than you, that has to be cool.
It's amazing.
I mean, speaking of that, we had our first, so one of our main shop manager is from Louisiana. We did a crawfish boil last summer, and just like seeing our whole team like out there eating crawfish, like playing bags, just enjoying like being part of the company. I mean, that's special. Like everyone buys in, they get it, like they love being there, they love hanging out with each other. I mean, that's like, I didn't understand that we would create something that people would enjoy back then.
Yeah.
So
I never really thought that you could, like, I always thought work was just like, you just don't enjoy it. That's just the way it goes.
Or they just don't tell the bosses that
they're going to all be listening to this. Like, those guys, they don't even know what's happening.
Yeah.
How it actually feels.
I should like follow up with employees after this, do a secondary podcast.
They're like, they're full of shit. We hate those parties.
Oh, the mandatory parties.
No, the Christmas parties are always a lot of fun, and get everyone to let loose.
When you like look back at the year, and that sort of marker.
I have a skewed view of Christmas party because like the Edible Beats Christmas parties that I was always a part of working at Linger, I mean they're like next level Christmas parties. So wherever we do one, I'm like, we gotta have a good Christmas party, Mike. Like it's not gonna be a button up shirt one.
Yeah, that's totally me. The buttoned-up shirt, like very.
The one time a year you buttoned up.
I think this is about as nice as it gets.
Yeah.
I think the other proud moment though is, I mean, I talked about the way back one, like finally sitting in the restaurant that we worked so hard to like literally build everything that was probably unnecessary with no budget. But I think, we were down in Mexico together and bought a lot together, and we have an opportunity now to like design our own project like on the lot that we own.
Oh, wow.
I mean, that was a pretty special moment just in terms of like kind of where we started and where we're going.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like there's more quality design fabrication firms? I feel like there's a lot in Denver, and is that unique or is that pretty, it's like you guys, Von Mod, Limited, right? Or
Elevated,
yeah. And it seems like more and more. Does that seem like a Denver thing, or is it?
That's good. That's a good question. I have noticed when we started, I felt like this is crazy. There's a huge hole in the market. There's like no one really doing this. I think Von Mod was before us.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't plugged in enough to know, that he was kind of doing that. But it does feel, I guess in my opinion, the growth in Denver has like spawned, like not only are we growing in terms of population, but like the design here, like 10 years ago, it was like, like you want to go to a cool restaurant, like there's a Red Robin down the street. You know what I mean? Like It's like true cowtown. Like, how long have you been here for?
6 years.
Okay, yeah. So you probably, I mean, you've seen it a little bit. But
but.
I mean, I remember like when Linger opened, it was like, this is the coolest place on earth. There's nothing like this, you know? And I didn't travel when I was young at all. So like, I think probably it wasn't until grad school when I met my wife now that she was like, we should travel. You need to like see some other stuff. You know? Like, I was like super non-cultured, and then, you know, and so she kind of showed me like the outside world. Like, you know, we went to Portland and Tokyo and all that stuff together, and then you come back to Denver, and at the time you're like, wow, there really isn't that much here, you know. But in the past 10 years, I feel like the design has gotten so much better from everyone. You know, like it's just been like pushing forward, I think, and so. With that has come the need for more fabrication companies, I think, and more people to build those cool ideas that everyone's coming up with.
Especially from two unicorns like you guys, like to have two partners who are born in Colorado. Surprised the firm's not called like Native Creative or something like really
we
annoying with
around.
How was that coming up with that name? You know, it was funny. You know, we started our raw design in like 2009, and we did it for a while, and then we moved here, and we're like, all right, we could set up raw. Oh shit, who is this raw creative? And it's like, oh man. And I even when we moved here, I like went to our attorney, and I was like, what's the rules here? And they're like, well, it's only if one of you is like diminishing the other person's brand by having both of it. And I was like, yeah, they're a lot better than us. We're going to diminish that. We're going to get sued real fast. But it was like an unfortunate thing. But anyway, I was fine with going away from that. But it was just our names too. It was Rebecca, Adam, Wagner. And I was like, that's not even their names.
Yeah, like, the funny part is like, you know, like you're like, oh, they're probably going to sue us. And meanwhile, like we're in a garage somewhere like, welding. You know, I think I saw your guys' website or the name come up, and I was just like, oh, that's cool. Like, you know, rising tide, both ships. Like, you know,
rises all raws.
The whole like the branding exercise is such a funny thing. I mean, we started off trying to figure out raw, and for a while it was just like we're gonna name it Raw, and then Mike one day was like, we kind of sound like a porn studio. He's like, let's just add creative to it. It's like Raw Creative came about, and Raw was
creative
the idea
porn
of, like,
studio.
And Raw was always the idea of
heavy on concept.
Like raw materials, and that was like the root of it. It was like we have always like raw materials that we're gonna do something cool with, and like for a while they were like, oh, this name, like we hate this name now.
Yeah.
But then like over time, and you know, 10 years in or 8 years in, we're like, Raw Creative is perfect for like the fabrication side. And for Build, you know, Build Studio is Blea Lujan Design Studio.
Ah, nice.
But Build is also like, you know, coming from the background of building things and tactile and so it has like a little more dual meaning. But every time we're like, we should name this company, we're like, fuck that. Like, can we get someone to help us with this?
Yeah,
that's what, with Build, we were kicking ideas back and forth, and like I'd say something, he'd say hate it. He'd say something, I'd say I hate it. And then Build, my wife was like, you should name it Build Studio because it's like your guys' last name. And we were like, yeah, all right, done.
Yeah, I know, it's so painful. Like with Vessel Office, I mean, we've been talking about starting a firm for like 4 years, and we have a iPhone notes document that you can just scroll forever. There's hundreds of names on there, and it's like, how have we not come up with something? And like, you know, we landed on Vessel, and that's pretty good. And it's like 90% there. And there was one other firm named Vessel Architecture, and they're in St. Louis. We're like, okay, we're good. We like do everything. We get the website up, and then all of a sudden they make a branch firm in Denver. And so they're in St. Louis and Denver, and it's like a firm that's like 30 years old. It's like, shit. But I mean, when you try to get like one word or whatever, everything's taken.
Yes.
You can't, you know, you got to make up something weird.
Or $100,000 to buy the domain.
That's true.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
But I like that when it's, you know, acronyms or something, and you get like, no, that's not what it is. It's our names. And
right.
Let's see what. Yes, what do you guys? I mean, we kind of talked about it with Build Studio, but what are you guys really excited about in the future? What gets you jazzed?
I'm really excited about having Raw Creative be more employee run. That's like one of my big kind of things that I'm excited about. But we also have some other stuff that we've been talking about for a long time, like with our concrete side. We're going to be launching like a product line and kind of another new company that has to do just with that I'm really excited about. And I'm also really excited to be able to really focus on architecture a little bit more.
Yeah.
And just kind of sink into it a little bit.
Do you see Build getting into a lot, like very large projects and, turning into a whole another 20-person firm, or?
I don't, but yeah. I think really in its best form, it would be, we do 50% of our own self-funded projects and 50% of projects that are just highly creative, where someone comes to us and says like, we want to do it right. We want to get into it, to a point where we can stay away from doing kind of the stuff that sometimes you have to do to keep the doors open.
Yeah.
And that's, I think right now we're looking at, there's the hotel project in Mexico, and then there's also a project up in the mountains. It's a 4-story building. And I think that's probably about the limit.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do much more beyond that.
Yeah.
I'm just excited for, I keep calling it like a reset. Like we've been drinking out of the fire hose for the last, 8-9 years, and it's been a lot to take in. And, being a control freak, we're like, we have to do everything. And now it's like we've learned that we don't have to do everything. And we're really focusing on just fabrication, just architecture, and kind of closing our construction side for the future here. And to me, that excites me because like we can put the energy that we were putting into that division, just really refocus it into architecture specifically. So to me, that's exciting. And, it's been a lot of conversations to get to that point of like, should we shut down the build side? And, it's the right move at this time. So,
yeah.
We've seen a lot of people that were doing a similar thing as us, shut their construction side down.
Yeah.
Like Huff shut their construction side down. I think Bill Moore with Sprocket, he kind of got away from construction. And
I think it works great to a scale. Like you can do these TI jobs with a really lean construction team, but now if we're designing, a nice home, like you can't build a home with one person. Maybe you can, but like it takes a lot of focus to do it right. And we're not about delivering something where we're going to fail to do it. And the projects that we're starting to get, like unethically, we could be like, yeah, we can build this. We would just be like thrown by the seat of our pants here. So, really just taking a step back and understanding that we're not the best fit to do all three anymore, I think is, kind of a proud moment, and just like come to terms with that we can really focus on what we're good at and let the builders build.
Yeah,
there's really good builders out
GCs,
there.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like now we've realized just to leverage those relationships.
Do they pick up the phone? That's what I have a hard time with.
That is a difficult part.
So many is maybe a stretch right now. But, or so many projects.
With our current business model, we've like, to them, we're a great resource because we're like, hey, here's our project. These are the CDs. You're going to bid on this. By the way, here's the fabrication package that we're going to bid on as well. So we're handing GCs the CD set and also an estimate for a lot of the custom millwork. That's sometimes hard for them to get numbers for anyway. Yeah. So like they're getting something with like a leg up, and that's like a nice relationship that we're starting to explore more in terms of, look, we're the architects, but we're also going to plug in our fabrication studio for X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's nice because we can just show that to the client and the general contractor and say, if you get numbers that are lower than this or better than this, then that's great. We're just putting our name in the running. Yeah. And it's kind of a...
But if you go with someone else, we're going to nitpick the shit out of it.
Right, yeah. You better be ready for the submittal phase. Yeah. It's coming back hard on you.
That's funny. I know, that seems like such a difficult business model. It hasn't come out yet, but I interviewed Mike Moore last time with Trace Birds, and like they're still doing, most of their construction, and it's like, how are you able to do that? But he seems to make it look easy. But
I feel like some people probably have figured out, they've unlocked that key, or I think really like it's having people that want to be doing that. Yeah. Really that's like their passion. And if you have a good team that it's all they want to do, then it's easier. But right now there's no, like you said, it's hard to get builders to pick up the phone. So it's hard to keep a staff that really wants to do it. It's hard to find subs, keep a sub base, unless you're building things consistently where your sub base is always working. And that's probably one of the biggest things that led us to that is Denver's so crazy right now. The sub base is so hard to find that it's just, it's like, let the GCs that have the subs, in their back pocket do all this stuff.
Yeah, just commit. Like, do we want to grow our build team to 5, 6, 7 people, or do we want to just refocus here? And that was the driver.
Yeah, it's nice to figure out sort of what you guys are about, right? I mean, I think taking business class in grad school, right, and of saying, well, what's the business model of an architecture firm? Like, it doesn't work very well when you fill out those blank templates, right? Of like, well, what's my proposition? Well, I'm really good at design. Okay, well, what's their proposition? Well, he's really good at design too. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, well, and for you guys to like carving out that niche of, we're really good at design, and we can tell you exactly how much this will cost to build this thing and whatever. Yeah, smart.
Yeah, I think we really enjoyed the building part, and we've talked about in the future it may come back, but right now it's just time to focus on architecture and fabrication. And there's some fun stuff, that plays there about like potential productization and things that we can manufacture in-house and sell that we've always talked about since we started and never had time to actually work on.
Yeah. Well, cool, guys. It's been great having you over to my house here and having you the first one
over here.
Yeah, I moving here. Obviously, we knew of you guys because we had the same name. But then reached out to you and had a early on lunch with Mike, and it's just been fun to see you guys grow and just like create really quality work. And so excited to see where this new studio goes. And If you get too many projects, just send them over my way, and we'll send you some kitchens. And
sounds good.
I'll give you $400.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Well, thanks for having us. I love listening to the podcast. I feel like it's like that imposter syndrome. It helps alleviate that a little bit. Listening to like the fact that everyone's fucked up.
Everyone has it. Yeah, exactly.
Everyone's got scar.
Should I not be cussing? Like, is that okay on a podcast?
No, I can. You'll get the explicit label on it, so you'll look a little more hardcore. But
now when it says raw and then explicit,
raw explicit.
Yeah.
That was the first one before creative was explicit. Yeah. Yeah. Well, cool, guys. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.
You can visit architecting.com, that's architect-ing.com, to see images from this week's guest.
And please rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts.
Have a great week and keep connecting.
Moving here, I was applying to so many firms, and you get to go and meet people, and but then you get a job, and you're like, oh, there's not much reason to do it. But now it's awesome. And like you said, like you put these people on like pedestals, but then you talk with them and it's like, oh yeah, like I could call you anytime for advice or whatever.
Right, yeah. Like the one with EJ Mead.
Yeah.
Like I thought that was a really good one. And I did some contract model building for them when I was an undergrad.
Oh, cool.
Where I worked directly with EJ and James. And I just was like so nervous talking to them. Just like I'd go into the firm and I'd be like, I'm so like outside of my league right now. Like, and there's just such good designers and their work's always so good. And I think even now, if I was talking to him, I'd probably still be nervous. But it just was interesting to hear him talk about, like, how I grew up and the things that he was interested in, and it like kind of humanizes everyone, I feel like.
And even him where, I feel like there's not many firms in Colorado that, have much of a national presence, right? Mm-hmm. And like, and it's easy for us to like elevate all these people and be like, oh yeah, EJ or whatever. But then even EJ was like, we're nowhere near like what these other firms are, and I'm like, whoa, you're pretty close.
Right.
Like, especially for here, but like you said, just that imposter syndrome like runs so deep.
That's for sure. To me, the thing to wrap my mind around is like, you're always like, how do I get to that point? And like you go tour some of these projects and there's always a sense of like, I could do this, and not in the sense of like I could design to this level, that like the scale of the project, like the process it's going through, someone's building, like you can see yourself like start to get to that point.
Yeah.
Which is like super inspiring. And I mean, I have a friend who I live with that he's a product manager on build up in Aspen. And I went and toured it when all like the steel framing was up and like all the LVL framing is in, all the steel detailing is going in. And I'm just like, this is amazing. You know, I was like so starstruck just like being in like a frame house.
Yeah.
And like, not that it's like we could do this because it was like next level.
Yeah.
But it's always like that factor of like, you know, it gives you something like to aspire to and like work towards. Like, how do I figure out like how to reach this level?
Yeah.
Isn't like touring that house like forbidden?
So yes.
We'll edit it out. That's,
I was just like, well, now everyone knows.
Well, maybe
this is going out live, right?
Yeah.
Well, but you know, like, and kind of to your point, like, okay, yeah, obviously they're really good, but if you have a $1,500 per square foot budget,
yeah,
and like, or whatever it is, like,
it's just like, it's like next level though when you're going there. And like for me, you know, fabricating, like you see like some of their detailing of like how they do drip edges, and you're like, this is so fucking cool, you know. And
I have a friend who beat out for a project, and it's because they had a 35% design fee on it, architect fee.
Yeah,
35% on
some of the some of the projects we're working on in Mexico right now. Like our friend who's building a lot of stuff down there, he got like proposals from and they're like, you know, $70K just for like a concept.
Yeah,
you know, which is like,
I'd love to get to that point.
Yeah, it's like, how do we, you know,
yeah.
But the trajectory of architecture in the terms of like running a business, you're like, you aspire to be like, how do we command those fees?
Right.
How do you build your business to that point?
Yeah.
Well, and how do you not, like when you're building that, how do you deal with the other side of that where someone's like, I'll do it for like $1,000 right now. You know what I mean? And
that's the part of like vetting clients that we went along the way, because we've been at too where it's like, we'll do this for cheap because it's going to like be a stepping stone to the next thing.
Right.
Then you get to the point where like, if you're considering us, but you're also considering the guys to do $1,000, this isn't a good fit regardless.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it's so hard. Like we've been having this discussion a lot about being like an AOR essentially. Like so we're AOR for a TI in Rhino with Frida Escobedo, Mexico City, and that was like sort of a hard thing of like, you know, she just won like the extension to the Met Museum in New York, and like we can work with her, but like we're design architects, you know, we're not architect of record, but like how do you balance that and like how many do you do? You know, like we're partnering with another husband-wife firm in the Hamptons, and like we're doing like CDs with them, and it's like it's like, you know, $1,000-$1,500 per square foot house. And so it's like cool details and things, but it's like, how many of these do we do, you know, before you get pigeonholed, but you also need to eat.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
But, and is it a stepping stone or,
which jobs keep the lights on versus which jobs advance your career? Yeah.
Well, I feel like it's kind of like lawyers, right? Like the way that they operate is like in doctors, people need that service.
Yeah.
And they're like, if you want it, you're going to pay for it. And that's just kind of the way it is. But with architects, it seems more like cutthroat, and also like, well, that's a really cool project, so I'm willing to cut my fee for it. Like lawyers are never like, well, that's a sweet project. You can like, that never happens.
Yeah, there's a bunch of like back alley doctors in architecture. Hey man, I'll give you that shot for $100.
And that's the draw like towards development is, you know, we're doing some products where we're self-funding and doing development on, because we can be as creative as we want, and you know, there's no like, it's our time at that point. You know, someone's not paying us for it. Obviously, at the end when we sell this project, it's our bottom line, but you're like more invested to be like, I want to make it really cool. Yeah, you know.
And there's no owners to argue with.
Yeah. I mean, so that's our business plan as well. We have a third partner who's a developer, and so the idea was like get the architecture firm running, get some revenue coming in, then bring him in and start developing. And you know, and it seems like that's what everybody's trying, every architect, right? Because it's the smart way to do it, and we're building up so much value for other people that aren't as good as us most of the time, you know, but just know these little things. But it's like, how do you know, that next step of getting that knowledge and experience, but
you know, in like communicating value to clients is so hard.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, especially when they're like, well, this guy's going to do it for half of what you said. And you try and explain like, well, they're not going to spend that much time on documentation and there might be more change orders. And, you know, good luck trying to sell that to a client, you know, unless they're sophisticated and they're like a larger client.
Right. I mean, and that's where it goes to choosing the right clients, right? But it's like all 400 of us architecture firms are going for those 10% of people, or 1% probably, right? 1% of the 1%.
Yeah.
But just to your point of like then building up your brand and your reputation, and you know, like in some ways it's funny to hear you guys saying like, oh, you know, these people that we look up to or whatever, because I feel like definitely in the community, like you guys are the ones that people look up to, like especially in the fabrications realm, and like and that, like you're the young cool, like doing good stuff for a while, and like who everybody wants to work for. And so
we're not even that young. Look at his hair.
He said that's only happened in the last 80 years.
Yeah. No, I think it's a trip, like when I hear that, because it's probably the same way that everyone feels like, you know, like you were talking about EJ earlier, like when someone says like, oh man, like what you guys do is so cool, and everyone, you know, I think at least for me, I'm like, man, today I was like sitting at my desk being like, what the hell am I doing? Like, I don't know what's going on. You know what I mean? Like, it just feels like a dumpster fire all the time. And you're always trying to be like, you know, eventually I'm going to get to like this level that's where these other people are at. And it's kind of just like a never ending thing that you're always.
Yeah. It's like, how do you find that satisfaction in what you're doing, and not continually chasing that other thing, but still pushing yourself, right?
Yeah. It's like celebrating the small victories is hard sometimes.
Yeah.
Because like you're always like striving for the next thing, you know? I always joke with my wife, like we're addicted to chaos.
Yeah.
Like whenever we're like feeling settled and feeling good, we're like, let's do something else, you know?
Yeah.
Like
let's start another business.
No, my wife was 6 months pregnant. And we're like, let's remodel. No, we were 3 months pregnant. We're like, let's remodel our house now because like we're feeling good.
You look spry. Yeah.
Start like demoing my entire house, and then 6 months come along when she's pregnant. I'm like, let's get a puppy, you know? Like our dog's gonna need another dog when our baby comes. Like we just are always like, you know, if we ever get stagnant or settled, we like need to like amp it up a little bit. And it's nice in the business to be like, you know, celebrate the small victories. Because there's times when we're like, all right, we're doing good, you know? I'm like, well, how do we like spice this up right now? And that happens quite often.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
It's like, fuck.
That's hilarious.
I know. You know, yeah. Like for so long, I said that I thought I was like addicted to stress, like coming out of studio, you know? And then this year, 2 months ago, I got diagnosed with ADHD. And like, that's what it is, where it's like, you're always chasing the challenge, and if you're not being challenged, you get sort of depressed, you know, and it like put a different kind of spin or thing on it, right?
Yeah,
like
that's interesting, because it definitely feels like when there's not a mountain to climb, that you're just kind of like, now what?
Yeah.
You know? Like,
well, it's like, you know, John Brandon Cruz that we went to school with.
Yeah.
His like whole thing is like the process is the prize.
Yeah.
And like not like living for like that end goal, that one moment at the end of the process. It's like really enjoying the ride and celebrating the victories, and like you learn a ton at every single step, and like you may be striving for like that one day or one moment or one completion, but like enjoying the whole ride is, you know, humbling in a way.
Because don't you feel like even that end, that mountaintop is it always sort of lets you down?
Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
it's definitely about. It's like, that's when I crash the hardest, right? After you win an award or after you do something, you're like, well, that's not as cool as I thought it'd be.
Yeah.
Like, where was the balloon drop? Like, where was the...
Right, for sure. Well, and it, like with the company, you know, like I always thought once we get a CNC machine, right, we're going to be like, it's going to be so awesome. And now that we have these cool tools, we have everything. And now I'm like looking back and being like, man, you remember when we used to work in the little garage, and then like we'd work for 10 hours, and then like I would go to Linger and sit at the bar while he was bartending with my wife, and we just like slam drinks for the whole night, you know,
covered in sawdust.
Yeah, and talk about how great it was going to be when we got a CNC machine. And in reality, that was the best time so far, was like having that time.
You had free chili, free coffee.
Yeah.
Well, all that you could smell.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Samples of hot sauce and ice cream.
That's so funny.
We just paid off the CNC, and I was like, "That's a good day."
Yeah. Now you're like, okay, I want to buy a new one. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think enjoying the ride is, you have to like just slow yourself down a little bit. Like I'm sure you know too with kids, it's like they're getting so big so fast, and I was like, "Fuck, you gotta enjoy that ride."
Yeah.
That's like what Andy. I always say this. Andy Paddock. He's a structural engineer that works a lot with CBW, with building the shop. He's awesome. He's like another one of our mentors. And
nice.
He was talking to me when I was getting ready to have my first kid, and he was like, "The best advice I can give you is like the days are really long, but the years are really short.
Yeah.
And when you put it together, that like from the moment your kids are born, you have 18 spring breaks with them guaranteed, and after that, like there's no more." And then when you put it that way, you're like, "Oh man, that's true. Like you only get so much time with them." And with us both becoming dads, I feel like that kind of like that actually probably helped level the company out a little bit, because both of us are maybe more addicted to chaos and we're gamblers a little bit.
The chaos comes from the kids now.
Right. Now we're like, I just want to go to work and it be quiet, and just chill.
But it's so true. We're just it's so easy to let every little deadline bring you down, or every task or every fire, and then like the kids are like, "Oh, you're just stressing me out more. Just like go away," or whatever.
Yep.
Because if every day feels so long, but I like, he's 5.5, and it's like that dude he's a full human, you know. And it's like we play like video games every night together, and he's like he tells me he loves me like 20 times a day, and it's just like the sweetest little guy, and it's like that's only gonna last like another maybe 9 years. That I get the love and the but.
Then it's going to be that I hate you.
Yeah. I know. Well, I get that too. He says that too. But if he says that, he gets dessert taken away. So he really saves that. Holds it back for really important ones.
That's hilarious. I was thinking today, actually, when I wrote you an email, I was reading through your questions and I started thinking back on like all the different stuff. I was like, holy shit, that feels like, it feels like it was 30 years ago, not 8 years ago, when we started. But
yeah, it's so funny. Like even like when we started in 2009, we did a restaurant, and then since my dad's a general contractor, like we framed up all the walls and we did it with SIPs, and like I was out there doing that, and then like me and a college buddy like poured all the tabletops, like 36 tabletops and bars, and like
that's awesome.
I feel like we were sort of on like your track, but yeah, it's hard to sustain that.
It's just like that was the pivotal point with the fabrication studio for us, was recognizing like the lost opportunity of like not outsourcing our shop to other professionals, because we're like, it's our shop, we're gonna only build for our projects, and like if we're in design, the shop's like, what are we building, guys? And the second we start doing, design assist in the terms of like, hey, you have a cool project that someone can build, like we'll work with you, we'll build it, we'll work in Revit with you. It's like now it's like, let's just make raw creative, an outlet for other professionals, and then we'll start our own architecture firm, and we'll just use raw creative the same way you would.
Which
that was like a huge like light bulb moment for us.
That's cool.
Which still blows my mind too, because like I remember being very cognizant of the fact that I loved working with all these other creative people when I was in school and working in the sink and everything. And it felt like, I don't know, like we were trying to like hold it close and like it's our shop, It's like something. And then once we realized that, I almost like working with other architects more than I like working on my own projects in the shop, just because I love seeing like the creative things that people come up with, and it's just
just that idea of collaboration, right? Like we can all be great designers, but there's people that are a lot better designers than I am, and that when you come together and do something,
I love problem solving. So to me, it's like that's a level of problem solving. Like we have this idea, we don't know how to really make it work, and I'm like, let's dive in and figure this out. We can, like, that's like the part that excites me, is being able to take an idea that no one else can build and engineer it to where it's realistic, like that's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to your point of just, we can't stay good at everything forever. And like the whole point is to hire better people than you are, right?
Right.
In a firm and
which is a huge like maturing thing for, at least for me. It was like that felt so hard for me because I wanted to,
I bet.
I wanted to be like the best,
right?
You know, and at the top of my game in our entire company. And then you realize like if you hire really, really good people, really smart people, then everyone gets better and everyone can train each other, and you know, and it has that collaborative effect, I think.
Well, cool guys. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Yo, Alexa, play the Plug podcast. My boy Rudolph enjoys an immersive audio experience. Do you feel me? Ho, ho, ho! With Echo Studio, we can listen to any podcast or song from Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and others. Click the link in this episode description.
Santa, check out my podcast.
Damn, even the Grinch has a podcast. Merry Christmas, ho! Ho, ho!